Welcome to episode 505 of the Red Dirt Agronomy Podcast. I am Dave Deacon, and have we got a very informative episode for you. This week, we're coming to you again from the Oklahoma Wheat Commission's booth at the 2026 KNID AgriFest in Enid, and you'll never guess who made eye contact with us. Jeff Hickman wears a lot of hats in Oklahoma agriculture, serving as chairman or executive director of several ag organizations across the state, while also serving as an Oklahoma regent for higher education, and he's also the former Speaker of the House in Oklahoma. In this episode, Jeff brings a boots-on-the-ground perspective to asking the questions that cut straight to what producers and ag organizations are facing right now. You'll hear a timely conversation about how ag groups stay effective, why grower involvement matters, and what policy and market issues are coming next for rural Oklahoma. This will be a great conversation. Just a reminder, you will be able to find all the information we talked about in this episode and past episodes on our website, reddirtagronomy.com. As always, we start with a quick trip around the table for an introduction to the dream team of dirt and everything that grows from it. Let's start with Oklahoma State University Extension Precision Nutrient Management Specialist.
He is begging for his bread.
Dr. Brian Arnell. And next to him is Oklahoma State University Extension Cropping System Specialist.
We need to cut that out, probably.
Dr. Josh Lofton. Let's kick off our conversation with Jeff Hickman that we recorded on January 9th, 2026, while we were at the Oklahoma Wheat Commission's booth during the 2026 AgriFest in Enid. You are listening to the Red Dirt Agronomy Podcast. We are once again at the Oklahoma Wheat Commission's booth here at KNID's AgriFest, and this has been a lot of fun this year. Josh is still waiting for his loaf of bread. They're still on cinnamon rolls right now.
It's 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and we're still working cinnamon rolls.
He's begging for his bread.
But they have gone through a lot of cinnamon rolls, and they're still making more. So I will get you a loaf of bread by the end of the day. I don't know if you can last that long, but I'll get it to you by the end of the day. So Josh, go ahead and introduce our guest.
So I didn't think we'd ever get him on as a guest onto the podcast.
Never been invited.
He's a busy man. Yes. Many hats. How many hats are we wearing?
And you didn't invite me today either, Dr. Arnold.
Actually, I told Tammy make sure he doesn't leave until he comes by and sees us. So I know how this works. Tammy's the one that sets the schedule, right?
That's true.
And so we got chairman of the Oklahoma Grain Sorghum Association and executive director of the Grain Sorghum Checkoff, and the chair of the Oklahoma Ag Retailers chair.
The CEO, yes.
CEO.
Grain and Feed and Ag Retailers. Yep.
There we go.
That's right.
And there's many more ands.
Yeah. Brian, help me here. I said I don't know all the hats he wears.
That's good enough. You all just care about me being in my regent role. That's you higher ed people. God, you just care about
they do. I'm outside of you.
But I do have a journalism degree, so I can analyze all of this.
There you go.
Former Speaker of the House.
Former Speaker.
That's it. So Jeff, what else? What else do we have? Jeff Hickman here, and like I said, a lot of hats.
No, that is plenty of hats. No, we at the Grain and Feed and Ag Retailers Association, those two board made the decision a long time ago that it's so important to keep our ag organizations viable, and it was getting harder and harder for these smaller groups to continue. So they made the decision to help manage and do the back office functions of things like the Sorghum Growers Association, the Sorghum Commission, the Wheat Growers Association.
Right. Man, I'm even in the wheat booth, and I forgot that one.
Certified Crop Advisors, the Seed Trade Association. We do some work with the aerial applicators because, again, it's so important for all of those groups, and it's harder and harder with consolidation and other things in agriculture that we all deal with to make sure that those organizations, and they're so important, and particularly from my time at the state capitol, those ag groups are so important, and when they walk in the door, it carries some weight. And so when you can go in and say these organizations are opposed to or in favor of something, that really matters, and you don't want to just walk in and say, well, we're just one group and we like your deal. It really gives agriculture a much greater amplified voice to have more ag organizations still viable in Oklahoma. And so that's why we're involved in more than just the grain and feed and the ag retailer side of things.
Well, I know the Growers Association, just in case anybody doesn't know, like a lot of times our growers associations for our commodities are the kind of the political arm. They're the ones that go out and speak for the growers of the state. And you being I don't want to say ex-politician, but a politician back in history.
Public servant.
Public servant.
Thank you.
Like, so I know before this has been done by people that didn't have a history in public service. So what do you think that's obviously helped you quite a bit in not even getting doors open, but getting invited into the doors because of that history?
Yeah, and we're structured a little bit differently because I serve on the State Regents for Higher Education. I'm not and cannot be a registered lobbyist. So we have both Jamie Longacre and Lori Peterson. A lot of folks from the ag world know the two of them, very professional government affairs directors out at the state capitol. And so they handle all of the day-to-day things. You know, when there are issues that they need me to come down and educate on, I do that. But they work on, you know, as far as opposing or supporting different initiatives. That's what they do on a day-to-day basis, and they're there every day watching out for our organizations. But no, I think it has been good to just have the insight. It also helps me nationally. You know, so many things in agriculture now are dictated by national policy, and so all of these groups we just talked about all have a national component. The National Sorghum Producers, for example, or the Sorghum Checkoff, the National Association of Wheat Growers. You know, all of those. You know, the National Grain and Feed. All of these have a national component, and so the relationships that I have, and then the experience to be able to both go to D.C. and to be here in Oklahoma and work with our elected officials now and relate to them and just know how the system works, I think is beneficial to our organizations. And we are becoming more and more dependent on public policy in agriculture.
Mm-hmm.
It impacts us more and more and more, it seems like, every year. Not just policy, but regulation.
Yeah.
That seems like we're seeing even more. We spend more time talking to administration officials and government agencies more so than members of Congress now at the federal level, just because regulations sometimes are more onerous to our producers maybe than even what the laws are.
So I don't know exactly the history before you were in politics at the state level. What was before?
What was before? So I had a degree in journalism, as I mentioned earlier. Actually worked as the special assistant to the athletic director and the president at the University of Oklahoma back when Steve Owens was the athletic director there, and then worked in public affairs. So we did a lot of foreign policy conferences, brought people in that did a lot of, people like Mikhail Gorbachev and Margaret Thatcher and Desmond Tutu and those types of things. We did a lot of those things on campus there, and then served as the university press secretary the last 3 years that I was there, and then left and moved back home, moved to Woodward, was vice president of a media company there that owns K101 and Z92, some of those radio stations out in the Woodward area, and ran for office in 2004. But in the midst of all of that, and the reason that I chose to run for office is that, I grew up, farming around the Tacoma and Cherokee areas, and even when I left and went off to college, and even the first 7 years of my work life, I had 2 vacations a year, and it was when we were planting wheat and when we were harvesting wheat.
Right.
Mm-hmm. People always thought, well, that's really strange. That's your vacation, but those were the 2 I took, and so was still, very involved. Have been from the time I was born in our farming operation in alfalfa and Woods counties. So
still to this day, is that is that correct?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
We farm kind of close to the county line, but kind of from Tacoma east over to north of Cherokee and south of Cherokee, that direction, but primarily kind of around the east of Tacoma area. So good wheat country, good sorghum country, good cattle country, and we're out there dealing with the challenges everyone else is dealing with, which is how do you make it profitable? And as Monty Hayes, the leader of the Sorghum Association, said today, how do you make it fun? How do you make farming fun again? Because it's just gotten where it's challenging, it's tough, and it's not as enjoyable because it's stressful on a lot of our producers now.
So, I've kind of worked with you as part of the Sorghum Commission, more extensively than your other roles or the sorghum growers in the commission. And we've gone through a very crazy political time, and I know the national impacts the state and all that. So how has it been like having such a very opposite sides of the coin on a political spectrum, working for growers of the state, going to the state and going to the national level when we're seemingly always changing our thought process at the Capitol.
The pendulum seems to be swinging farther and farther each year when it swings. It goes farther to the right, and then it swings farther to the left. And I think that's a challenge for producers that are just trying to get up every day and take care of livestock and do what they do on the farm. And I think it's difficult because you have such large swings in, again, as I mentioned, not just in policy, but also in regulations in the regulatory environment. It's tough. It really is tough. And it seems like the pendulum is swinging more extreme. And I think social media, and there's a lot of reasons why politically we are where we are right now as a country. But it trickles down. It trickles down to the state level. So all these conversations we've been having about the Make America Healthy Again issues and what that means to agriculture. You were talking about your loaf of bread and your cinnamon rolls a while ago. I don't know if that's the top or the bottom of the food pyramid now, but we had that all come out this week. How does that work? So I think all of those things are things that are impacting growers, and it seems like used to be just worried about the Department of Agriculture. Now there are all these other federal agencies that are doing things that are impacting prices on any given day or impacting consumer demand or consumer thought. There's just a lot of things that people in agriculture have to think about now that maybe they didn't have to worry about before. And when those things happen in Washington, it doesn't take very long before you see similar legislation coming out of your state capitals around the country. And so when I get together with other directors of state organizations, whether it's the Kansas Grain and Feed Association or it's Texas Sorghum or it's Montana wheat growers, they're seeing this too. Is something will kind of catch on with a certain group on one side of the other political spectrum in D.C., and it's not long before you see legislators trying to push those same issues at the state level. And we've seen that here with whether it's things related to pesticides and herbicides, whether it's things related to food dye. Some of those things, if they can't accomplish them federally, they'll try to accomplish them state by state or vice versa. So it usually ends up, it'll show up sooner or later. And we also watch what happens in other states too, because sometimes if something happens at the Capitol at Texas, it's probably coming here in another year or two. So if I talk to my colleagues there and they say, hey, we really had a challenge with this issue at our state capitol, I have a pretty good idea that's coming here soon. By and large in Oklahoma, we're a rural state, we're an agriculture state, and for the most part, agriculture has been able to do what they need to do here politically. Agriculture is very well respected and trusted in Oklahoma, and so when we've gone to the Capitol, and when I was at the Capitol, there was a really seamless relationship. There's fewer and fewer legislators from rural parts of the state, more urban legislators. Fewer and fewer by far that are directly involved in production agriculture. I was a small group when I was there. Now there's even fewer now that are directly connected to agriculture at the Capitol. That's why it's so important there's people running for office this year that are in agriculture to give you that voice, because it's getting harder to do what we need to do with people that understand how we do things, understand the science behind how we do things. And that's why I think it's so important that we have people that have a connection to agriculture or understanding or even a willingness to listen and learn elected to office at the state and federal level.
So, I mean, I've always told, the students back at OSU is that, we have these certain things that we have to hurdles that we have to come over from a social perspective. And historically that was, we have to make things economically viable, agronomically, and then environmental became a big thing. I feel like now social acceptability has almost become one of the biggest hurdles, or probably one of the ones that's a big tripping point, because we haven't had experience doing that. And I think, so do you think on both sides, because you as somebody coming in for agriculture to the capitals as well as a previous politician, do you think people knowing and being more interested in agriculture and where their food's coming from is a good thing, or is that something that we're going to have some growing pains on before maybe it does become a good thing?
Could both things be true?
Maybe.
I think it can be a good thing, but I think you nailed it. There's going to be some education process, because people being more interested is one thing, but when they go to find that information, whether they're finding factual information or they're finding information, because you can find something that confirms your opinion on anything. Just get on Google or get on social media, and I think that's part of the problem is you have people that want to know, but it's maybe we have more information at our fingertips than we ever had, but it may be harder to find the truth than it's ever been.
Yeah.
And so I think maybe both things can be can be true. It's a good thing that people are re-engaging with agriculture and where their food comes from. But we have to make sure that there's factual information out there for them to access, because it's very easy for those who are opposed to agriculture or want to cause problems and challenges for agriculture to put out false information, particularly using AI now. You can generate so much stuff that looks very real and very legitimate that couldn't be farther from the truth. So I think both things can be, but you're exactly right. There's so many more things you think of. My oldest daughter, grew up FFA president, all of those things with an ag background. She's a designer for J. Jill, the women's clothing company. They're based in Boston. So she's in Boston designing clothes every day and worrying about that. But those are conversations they have in their meetings, is we need to buy cotton. But it matters to our consumers about what country that cotton comes from and what the political environment is, and then what are the workers experiencing where they're not just where the cotton's produced, but where the garments are being made. And all of those conversations are more and more important, because consumers now want to know that when they go buy an article of clothing. I didn't really think about that when I put my undershirt on today, but there are people that's a point of information. They want to know where that dress or where those pants or whatever, where that came from, what were the conditions, and they want to be able to find that, whether it's on a tag on a garment or whether it's on a website on the clothing store where they make their purchase. So it's interesting for a girl who used to give speeches about cotton, who's now setting up at one of the leading retail companies designing clothes, thinking about, and she's probably one of the very few people in Boston, Massachusetts, that knows about cotton production in Oklahoma and used to give speeches about it. But it's fun to see her career go that way. But it's very different, and tariffs impact that. Shipping routes. Pirates. I have conversations with her about where they're trying to get shipments back in and they can't because of pirates. I thought that was a Disney movie, but they exist, and it impacts commerce here. So there's so many things that are impacting our producers that we've never even thought about before.
So do you think? I guess I don't want to say anybody, because I'm sure there is, but do you think a bulk majority of America, I think you said something of, has a favorable outlook on agriculture? Do you think that is people that have an unfavorable outlook on agriculture? Do you think that's big anymore, or my biggest thing is after COVID, when people didn't get their products, they're now like, oh, we really do need this agriculture and this transportation sector and stuff like that. Now, they can have very different opinions, and like you said, those can be on very different ends of the spectrum, which seem to be getting further and further from each other by the day.
Right.
But do you think anybody still has a negative impact or negative outlook on agriculture, or just wants their agriculture to be the way they want it to be?
Well, anybody's a pretty broad group. So are there people that are, yes, we still see people that are opposed to the way that we do things in agriculture. So yes, there are still those people out there. I think COVID definitely opened the eyes of a lot of people. When you walk into the grocery store and there's nothing there, it gets your attention pretty fast, because, it's pretty important to eat every day. We all have to do that on any given day. And so I think that was a real wake-up call. But also, again, with social media and everything else, we have as a species, have a shorter, well, I shouldn't say as a species, because it's not true in every country, but definitely as Americans and in a lot of other countries, we have a much shorter attention span than we used to. So COVID was a good reminder, but how quickly do we forget?
That's a good point.
So I think it's, again, where these organizations and our universities and others are so important to educate and remind people about why this mattered in 2020 and why it still matters today. We've got the problem fixed, and you still have things in your store, but we're, again, one other crisis away from that not being the case. So I think we have to continue to have those conversations, because I think our attention span is much shorter than what it used to be. That problem is solved, so now we've moved on to other things in the minds of a lot of people, and I don't have to worry about that anymore. And you don't until the next time you do. And so I think it was educational. It raised some support and awareness, but I'm guessing there's a lot of folks that were aware that have moved on to other things that aren't as concerned as they were.
I can talk to him all day.
I know
you have any questions.
I do, but I don't know if it's the right
realize
point
you were
of
still
jumping
here.
in. I know, right?
Welcome.
I kind of want to go back to your current roles, because it intrigues me, not what you do, but how you do it. Can you kind of dive into the benefits of being involved in so many different groups and maybe some of the challenges? Because I see that it can't all be roses every day when you're dealing with that many, not just timeline, but
Well, I mentioned our government affairs team, and we have an outstanding team, and Jamie Longacre and Lori Peterson, who also serves as our general counsel. She's an attorney, but there's a reason we have two. And that's because occasionally, and it hasn't happened hardly if ever in the 5 years that I've been in this role, but occasionally you're probably going to have an issue when a grower organization may have a different opinion than the Grain and Feed Association. Every once in a while a farmer and the elevator manager may have a disagreement. And so that can be true of the associations too, or ag retail may have a different opinion, and even within those groups. So the Grain and Feed Organization, we represent cooperatives. We also represent independents, and sometimes even folks in the same business have a different opinion. That's also why we have Jamie and Lori, because if there's ever a time when that would happen, and again, for the most part, agriculture is kind of on the same page, and we, as an entity in Oklahoma, the ag groups try to get together and work through those issues. But if there is ever a time that we had to separate off, and that Lori had to represent a growers group, and Jamie had to represent an ag retail group, we have the ability to do that, and that's kind of why we're structured the way we are with two of them. So there can be challenges, but I also think there's opportunities there, because if you're just all separate, you don't really know what the needs are or the challenges are. And so for us to be able to bring those groups together and communicate, the different board chairs to be able to have relationships and meetings together from time to time, even just socially, so that when issues do arise, I think there's a real benefit to that. So there can be challenges, but we find, just like any of us, when you actually sit down and talk to someone, you'll find you have probably a lot more in common with them and that you agree with and you don't. With our ag groups, for the most part, you find a lot more in common. They may not do everything the same way. You may have some frustrations, but it's worked well for us.
I mean, beyond current commodity price and input cost, what's some of the common themes that you're hearing amongst the groups you're working with about whether, what are they seeing on the horizon as needs, whether it's from us as a university or the state or the feds?
Yeah, I think particularly right now for our grower groups, there's options out there of what, they're trying to make planting decisions, and they're looking at input costs for different commodities. They're looking at market prices and trying to guess. And just a lot of them are struggling with what do I need to do? I had the best sorghum I've ever raised last year, and the price went away. I had no market for it. So do I plant more of that, or do I plant corn that's more drought tolerant now and try that? Are you going to have another summer next year like you did last summer? Probably not. Conditions were pretty good there. What's the future for wheat? And we're as an industry nationally having strategic planning and those conversations about wheat. What is our what's our thing? Corn has ethanol, and what does wheat have as our thing? Are there more uses for straw we need to be talking about, and what's the market there? Is there something related to fuels, or is there something else that can be? Because we've kind of just wheat's been wheat. It's been a big deal forever, but there's all these other options now. When you start looking at profitability, it's caused the wheat industry to start having some very serious conversations about the future. And so the National Association, in fact, I'll be in D.C. in a couple of weeks. We're just in Minneapolis. I saw Keith Felty, the former national president of the wheat growers over here. I was with him in Minneapolis for strategic planning with the new CEO of the National Association of Wheat Growers, just trying to figure out how do you make this profitable for a farmer in Alfalfa County or in Grady County to do this, so that they don't have to worry about it. And that's why these groups exist. You still need the Jimmy Musics of the world. You still need people that'll go be a part of these things, so that other folks can stay home and worry about raising that crop and not have to worry about all the other things. But there's a lot of people worrying about all the other things on behalf of producers, and that's why it's so important that you join them. Even if you can't go to a meeting, if you can, for $50, you can be a member of the Wheat Growers Association. And with that, you get representation, you get access to group health insurance plans, all of those types of things that you get with a $50 membership. Had it not been for the Oklahoma wheat growers working with Congressman Lucas and the National Association of Wheat Growers working in D.C., the CFAP payments never would have happened for wheat. It's $50 to be a member of the Oklahoma wheat growers. I'm guessing most wheat growers got far more than $50 out of their CFAP payments, but those never would have happened without Oklahoma Wheat Growers Association, Frank Lucas, and National Wheat Growers working in D.C. to make that happen. So it's so important to be engaged in those things, so that you can get up every day and go get on the tractor or go check cattle or do whatever you do and not have to worry about all the other things.
So here's one that I'd kind of like you to give a plug because you're a farmer. A lot of the times we hear from those men and women who are in the daily life at the farm. They feel it's so hard to take that time to break away. Can you speak for a moment on what it takes? What point in a person's life do you say, okay, why don't you go look at representing the state or your region or your county? How can we get more people involved? Because we do need more involvement from all levels, both the young, those mid-career, and then the later career producers. How do we get more of that?
Well, and again, it's challenging because it has to be the right point in your career or your business operation to be able to go step away, whether you're running for the legislature or whether you're even running for county commissioner or school board, or whether you're going to be on a national sorghum board or a state wheat growers board, whatever it may be. It's got to fit in your business operation. It's got to fit with your family. You have a spouse and children you have to take into consideration, and most farm operations are a team effort. Husband and wife are both very involved, and so we see that too, where maybe the husband's involved and the wife is taking care of the cattle operation every day, or vice versa, where the wife's involved in the association and the husband's home and managing the operation and making lunches for kiddos to get to school the couple of days that his wife's gone to these national meetings. So it really is a team effort, and it can be either one. It doesn't have to be just the husband or just the wife, because when you're in agriculture, if you're married into it, doesn't matter whether you're husband or wife, you're in agriculture, and you've got insight that will help. And so we work with a lot of couples where husband or wife is part of these national associations. So, but that's the way this whole system of government works in America, and it's the way all of our other organizations work, is you have to have people willing to take a short period of time. It's not supposed to be forever. The Founding Fathers didn't envision career politicians. But step away and go serve for a while and bring your experience to those policy discussions. That's the only way anything ever changes.
Do you see much mentorship when somebody has decided to take that step forward? And I'm thinking, a gentleman stepping up today in the Sorghum Commission saying he's running for House, and I've known him for a long time. But is there mentorship if somebody says, I'm going to take that leap from the community, say, this is how you deal with it, or is it really kind of fall in and just go for it?
Well, there used to be. In fact, when I ran for office, there was a lot of candidate recruitment. But that politically is a time in Oklahoma. We think of Oklahoma being this conservative and Republican state. We've long been a conservative state. We've not always been a Republican state. When I was elected to the Oklahoma House in 2004, the Republicans got the majority in that election cycle. And they did it by, going out and recruiting people to win seats. Term limits were going into effect, so there were a lot of open seats, but you needed somebody so you went and recruited a veterinarian like Lee Denny in Cushing. You went and recruited an emergency room doctor like Doug Cox in Grove, Oklahoma. And you went and recruited these types of people that were community leaders, well-respected, that probably typically wouldn't have run for office. And then, I think it was 2008 when the Senate, for the first time in state history, became a Republican majority. So you had people that would go out and recruit. We've now become, as we talk about the political spectrum, we're so Republican now that you can kind of just go sign up as a Republican. I don't think as much time is spent on candidate recruitment as it used to be. So that's different. But I think... there are groups. Farm Bureau had a candidate school I went through. They still do that. So there are groups that are supportive, and then there's a whole lot of us that have served in that role, that serve as a resource. And when you run for office, that's really one of the best things you can do is go talk to people that have done it, or go talk to people that share your values and interests. And so you have people like Madison Boley and Dylan Travis and others that have called and said, "Hey, what do you think about this, and what do I need to know?"
When it comes to, we've really talked about the agriculture side of it, but agriculture equals rural America and rural Oklahoma. You've been a voice for rural Oklahoma. How do you relate that to a state legislature that may not be as agriculture and rural Oklahoma driven on any topic, say even water rights?
Right. You've got to find a reason that it matters to them and a reason it impacts them. We used to have these conversations about rural hospitals when I was in the legislature. That was a big topic, and continues to be a challenge to make sure that we have access to health care in rural Oklahoma and all of rural America, for that matter. And so I used to have those conversations with my friends and colleagues from Oklahoma City and Tulsa and say, I know you really don't care about the hospital in Guyman
Right.
or Boise City or wherever it may be, but do you go snow skiing in Colorado? Oh, yeah, we go out there all the time. That's when I drive through the Panhandle. In the winter months, really? Yes.
Right.
Oh, yeah, we drive out through there every winter. Have you ever thought about it? What happens if you have a car accident?
Yeah.
There's usually a long, quiet pause.
Right.
And then all of a sudden it matters to them
Yeah.
that there's a hospital in Guyman, Oklahoma, because if they're driving to New Mexico or Colorado to go snow skiing and something happens, they're going to want access to health care in rural Oklahoma, even though they may live in Edmond
Right.
or Norman or Jinx or Broken Arrow. So you've got to relate these things to folks, to why it matters to them. And again, we care about, as humans, we should care about other people, and we want everybody to be, but we're also human too, and you need to be reminded why it matters to you and how this could impact you. And so I think that's part of the conversation. And plus, it's the economy of the state. The more revenue and the more viable rural Oklahoma is, the less resources we need from the state capital to be directed to rural America. They can go other places. And so that was always my conversation too, is the more of this we can generate, the better it is for everyone.
Yeah.
You remember the MAPS project that Oklahoma City did?
Yeah.
They built the first arena, and all of that started. There was a column by a gentleman by the name of Robert Lee, who was originally from Buffalo, Oklahoma, but he was a columnist for the Daily Oklahoman. And he was talking about why the MAPS project was needed in Oklahoma City. And it was because Bricktown there were all these warehouses that were just falling apart, and it was this dilapidated. It was this terrible part of Oklahoma City. And that's why they had to do the MAPS project, was to revitalize downtown. And he made the case that was necessary not because of anything that happened in Oklahoma City. It was because all the retailers in rural Oklahoma that went out of business when times got tough, and the wholesalers in Oklahoma City had no one left to sell to.
Right.
And so they went out of business. And he was making the case that, rural Oklahoma may not be the bread and butter for our state, but they're the potatoes and gravy. And somebody better be paying attention, because don't think for a minute that what happens in Woodward or Altus or Idabel doesn't have a direct impact on people that live in Oklahoma City or Tulsa. And the MAPS project and Bricktown was a great example of why it mattered to Oklahoma City, what happened in rural Oklahoma.
Right.
So how much do you think that message still kind of resonates today? Because looking back at history, a lot of people would. Again, we're talking about going on two different sides of the spectrum. How much would that resonate today if somebody from, a district down in Oklahoma City saying, you know what, for us to do really good and maybe to renovate a new arena or to build something, we really need to take care of Altus, right now. You think that still resonates?
Well, those things are based on sales tax. And last time I checked, the folks that were going into OYE or the Cattlemen's Congress were staying in hotels, and they were eating in restaurants and feeling. So the state basketball tournament, I just start thinking about, you just take the fairgrounds in Oklahoma City as one example. Think about the revenue that's generated there. And I would say the overwhelming majority is not by anyone that lives in a zip code in the Oklahoma City metro area.
Or any metro area, really.
Yeah, that's very true. And so those are people that are coming to Oklahoma City, they're dropping off their tax dollars, and they're leaving, and they're not consuming any services. They're not relying on the fire department. They're not relying on the water the water system to work or the sewer system to work. They're coming and literally dropping off money, staying a couple days, and they're going home. And so that's why it matters, and that's how you're able to build a new arena for the Thunder, is not just because of Oklahoma City, but it's the people that come into the city and leave dollars and go back home and don't consume services. And I think it's very important. It's a story we have to all be telling, though, because, again, we have short attention spans.
Well, I guess I'll ask one to kind of drop off. I mean, you typically have your ear to the ground quite a bit on. Yes,
Look,
thank
bread.
You. Thank you. One
Liberty
slice of
brought
bread.
you bread.
Dr. Galvin's delivering bread. Where's this on the food pyramid, ma'am? Do you know?
Do we?
Okay.
It's still
used
in
to be
there.
on
That's
It's on the
interesting.
cornerstone, right?
This one, and now it's so. With your ear to the capital, both capitals, what do you think is a hot button issue that we might be seeing in the next six to 9 months that growers would really find a lot of interest in?
Yeah, I think this whole issue of trade is far from being settled. I think there's been some real challenges. I think the promise has been there's going to be some long-term benefit from it. I think hopefully growers are saying, okay, we've kind of been through the challenging part. When's the long-term benefits start happening? And so hopefully we start seeing some of that come to fruition on trade, just some resolution of where are we headed in this trade issue, because it has such a dramatic impact on prices and just the ability to do what we need to do. And so I think that, farm policy, there's been it's really hard to plan when you're just relying on a disaster payment or a random payment, and to have a true farm policy that you can count on. I think our national grower groups talk a lot about that. If we get the farm bill right, then maybe we don't need all these ad hoc disaster payments. They end up costing more money than what they necessarily have to do. So that's probably out there. But in Oklahoma, we're going into an election year. We're going to be electing a new governor this year. In fact, every statewide office holder, I think, is term limited except for Todd Russ, the state treasurer, who's running for re-election. But you're going to have a whole lot of attention paid to that and a whole lot of conversations. And that's when people in agriculture, there's all citizens, but this is when you need to have those conversations. When people are running for office, don't wait to try to form a relationship after someone's elected. Get involved now. Get involved with people that share your interests and values, but educate them now too. Open those doors up, build those relationships, so that when we do need something as an industry, or you do need something as an Oklahoman, your first phone call isn't, "Hey, I need something from you." It's, "Hey, remember me? I met you at a town hall meeting, and I think we have some things in common. Can we talk about this challenge I'm facing?" So in Oklahoma, this is a very important time for folks to be paying attention to who these candidates are and being involved in their campaigns. But hopefully I think the trade deal has had a dramatic effect on all of us, and hopefully it'll have a positive effect on us long term. But I know growers are really kind of ready to see what that's going to look like.
I mean, it's a good, important thing to remind everybody, is because, I think oftentimes we think in a midterm election year or something like that, it's like, oh, this is almost a lame duck year kind of thing, that nothing's maybe less policy, but there's a lot to be done in politics this year. There
is, and in this administration too. I mean, you're going to have a lot of people start talking about who the next president's going to be, and you're going to have that ramping up. I don't get the feeling from this administration that they're going to go quietly into lame duck patterns. I'm pretty sure that President Trump's going to be working right up till the minute that his term has expired on things. And so I think there's still a lot of opportunity and a lot of things that can still be happening in this space, whether it's with Secretary Rollins or others in the ag space. So I think you're going to have rumblings about who, Marco Rubio, or who are those candidates going to be, but it's not going to cause the current administration to just kind of say, okay, we'll set back and kind of get ready for the next administration. I think you're going to have campaigns in full mode and administration in full mode to take advantage of the opportunity they have right up to the last minute.
And that's why he is a fill-in on Flashpoint from time to time, because he's got that knowledge and called upon whenever Todd Lamb's not.
I'm used to sitting next to Mike Turpin at state regents meetings, so my shoulder's already bruised before I ever get to Flashpoint, because you sit there in those meetings, and Mike Turpin is the same way. People say, is he like that in person? Mike Turpin is the same way on television as in person. He'll sit next to you in our board meeting. He's slapping you. Do you hear that? Do you hear what the chancellor said? Do you hear? Yes, Regent Turpin, I'm in the same meeting you're in. I heard everything you heard.
And would you mind hitting this elbow now?
Yeah,
it's hurting more.
He's the only person I've ever heard drinking a Mountain Dew. I'm like, Mike, Mountain Dew? Really? What are you? We're at a Regents meeting at Northwestern now. He's drinking Mountain Dew. I'm like, you of all people.
Right.
Like, it doesn't affect me. Doesn't affect me. Doesn't affect me. I'm like, how would you know?
Well, thank you so much for coming on with us this week.
This has been fun.
Yeah. This has been a lot of fun. We hope to have you back.
Right. I'd love to do it. And thank you guys for everything you're doing in this industry. Appreciate you very, very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening in on this conversation of the Red Dirt Agronomy Podcast. And if you'd like to join the next discussion, leave us a message on our website, reddirtagronomy.com. We would like to thank Jeff Hickman for joining us on this episode of the podcast. And again, if you get a chance, visit our website, reddirtagronomy.com, to find out more about our guests and any of the resources we discussed today on this episode. For Dr. Josh Lofton and Dr. Brian Ernell, I am Dave Deacon, and we all want to thank you for listening. The proceeding is a copyrighted recording of Ag Now Media, LLC 2026. And yes, all rights are reserved.